Good afternoon, everyone. I am so glad that I'm going to be interviewing Miss Pamela Wynn today, who is an NNJ member. And I have met Pamela several years ago and just am always in awe of our members and the work that they do, but she's really, really special. So I'm glad to have her today and talk to her a little bit about what she does. So Pamela Wynn is known as the face of dignity for incarcerated women and is an activist in Atlanta, Georgia. She is a national leader in anti-shackling legislation and has helped inform policy throughout the South, helping pass legislation in more than 15 states throughout the country. Wynn is the founder of RestoreHER Us America, where she spearheaded the unanimous passing of HB 345, Dignity, Georgia, that bans shackling and solitary confinement of incarcerated pregnant women. She helped garner overwhelming support of the probation reform legislation in Georgia, in which some of its language was incorporated into the historic passage of the federal First Step Act. Restore Her is a core movement partner of the Southern Black Girls and Women Consortium and a member partner of the National Network for Justice. Pamela is co founder of the formerly incarcerated College Graduates Network. She also founded Unlocked Minds program in partnership with Spelman College for Incarcerated Women. Pamela is a 2017 Leading with Conviction Fellow of Just Leadership USA, a 2018 Aaron J. Vully Fellow of Feminist Women's Health Center, a 2019 Community Change Women's Leadership Fellow, a 2019 Soros Justice Fellow with Open Society Foundation, a 2021 Opportunity Agenda Communications Institute Fellow, and a member of the 2021 Women's Transcending Collective Leadership Institute. So, with that, thank you so much, Pamela, for joining us today. Tell me, who are you? How did you get here?
Well, first of all, hi, Angeline. It's good to see you, and thank you for having me. I am Pamela Wynn. I am a Southern, what they call grits. Um, yes, grown, raised in the South. I am a Grady baby. For those that don't know what that means, is if you're from Atlanta, Georgia, and you're really homegrown, you were born at Grady Hospital. Um, I am like most, I guess, from back in the day, I am of age. I'm over 50. So I'm known as what we consider from a typical Southern family, which means that I come from a family that was low income and uneducated. So I was the first of my family to graduate high school, to attend and graduate college, and definitely to be an entrepreneur and own a business. I'm a mother of two sons who are now 28 and 30. I am a new grandmother as of November of 2020. And I am a woman that is concerned about other women, especially those of color like myself, and empowering us and uplifting us. And more, last but not least, I am formerly incarcerated. And so that also plays a role in being a woman of color and being directly impacted. So it's very important to me that I represent that population of women, and I do what I can to incur a lot of the injustices that we endure and that I endured myself in
Mhm.
that space.
And you're saying that your experiences helped inform you, and then some of the work that you do right now, and being a fellow of all of these different organizations, you are really committed and passionate to ensuring that women are elevated, women particularly that are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. And so, talk a little bit about one of the things that you worked on was this anti-shackling legislation. I know probably the first time that I had heard about women being shackled while incarcerated was Kemba Smith, and her talking about her story. So, talk a little bit about your commitment and passion to making sure that this legislation is passed. And is in your bio, I mentioned over 15 states have taken this on. So, talk a little bit about that work.
Of course. So, as I stated, being the first from my family to achieve things, as a little girl, it was always my dream to own a business because I knew that my family was uneducated, which made it hard for them to have financial gain. So, it was always my dream. If I had my business, I could hire my family and, you know, didn't have to worry about the issues of them not being educated and those type things, and having criminal backgrounds because my mother was in and out of incarceration during my childhood, and then my brother also ended up following that same path, and then myself, like I say, ended up later on in life in my 30s, being the first time that I got in trouble, ended up there. And what I found during my incarceration was a lot of the things that we believe as non-directly impacted people, the myths that they sell us were just that, myths, that they get 3 meals, they provide them everything that they need. They're fine there. And that's what I always thought up until my own experience with my family. As long as I made sure they had money on a regular basis and I went and visit them, at least once a month on a regular basis, then they had what they needed. My own personal experience taught me that all of that, none of that is true. It's totally a myth. During my incarceration, I was pregnant. And at the time, I had not been convicted or sentenced. I was being held because the prosecutor did not allow me to bond out. And during my holding, I was being held at a private prison that contracted with the feds because my sentence was a federal sentence. And because I had not been sentenced, convicted, and sentenced yet, I was still going back and forth to court. And each time I would go out to court, they would shackle me. And shackling entailed cuffs around my ankles that connected together with a chain, and then another chain double wrapped around my belly that connected to the wrist cuffs on my hand. And when the first time that they did that to me, and I explained to them, that I was pregnant, and, I don't think it was a good idea to wrap heavy chains around my belly, their response to me was, this was part of their contract with the feds, with the U.S. Marshals, and that it had to be done. And one of the days that I was being transported, I slipped, I fell, because the handcuffs are designed that the more movement you do, the tighter they restrain you. And each step I took this particular day, the ankle cuffs were tightening up to the point where they had literally cut into my skin. So when I tried to step in the van, it was very painful and I misstepped and fell. Falling was the equivalent of watching a tree fall because I was so restricted with the shackles. I was not able to, do a common human reflex of put my hands out to brace my fall. So I just fell flat. And then even when I fell, there was nobody asked me, was I okay? Nobody took me to medical to be checked out. They just basically scooped me up, put me on the van, and took me on to court. When I returned, still nobody checked on me or asked me any questions. And eventually I did start having problems. I started spotting, streaking, bleeding. I'm sending requests to medical. They're telling me that this is no, after 2 weeks of ignoring me, they finally sent a response saying that it was normal. And basically, I responded back and told them. So, my background was I was a registered nurse when all of this happened, and my specialty was women's health. And so I responded back, letting them know, what my background was and that it was not normal. And at that time, they brought me up to the front as a professional courtesy, they told me, because these were my colleagues. We had, colleagues in common that, that we all knew together. And they basically let me know that the facility was built for men. They didn't expect to have women, not especially not a pregnant woman. And that was absolutely nothing that they could do for me, not even offer me a prenatal vitamin. And so it came down to they would have to send a request to the marshals to take me out to the ER. And we did that. And the approval time, the turnaround time for sending a request and getting approval was 4 weeks. So at this point, it's about 8 weeks later, and it's no longer an emergency. So when we show up at the emergency room, which was also very humiliating to sit in the waiting room, shackled, and watching people brace themselves, pull their kids, tighter to them, because as again, as non-directly impacted people, if you see a person shackled all up, you're gonna automatically think they must
Right.
have done something horrific,
Mhm.
to be that in all of those chains.
Mhm.
But that was not the case. I had not hurt anyone. It was a white collar crime. um and then once we made it to the doctor, we had the doctor looking at us like we had 100 heads, because he's like, this happened 8 weeks ago. This is the emergency room. This is no longer an emergency. And he directed them to take me to an obstetrician. And of course, they couldn't do that. We had to do another request. So basically, we ended up sending out a total of 4 requests: the ER, obstetrician, ultrasound, and then the final one was for me to have that ultrasound read and follow up with the doctor. Well, waiting for that last approval is when I miscarried. I ended up miscarrying. And even then, there was no solid plan of how to care for me. First of all, when they lock us down at 10 o'clock at night, there are no emergency call buttons or anything in the cells. So you basically have to wait until an officer makes rounds if you need anything. And that particular night, right after we got locked in, I hadn't drank anything all day because the water fountain was spouting out brown water, which was another issue. And of course, depending on what guard was working, if you could get any, drinkable water or anything. And that day, the officer was not willing. So I had not drank anything all day. So as soon as we got locked down, I started cramping, and I knew it was because I was dehydrated. And so now I'm drinking water out of a sink that's connected to a toilet,
Mhm.
doing what I need to do to make sure, ensure the safety of my baby. The cramps got more, so I decided to lay down and go to sleep, thinking that I would wake up and have fresh water to drink. But I was awakened because the cramps turned into contractions and the pain was too much. I got back up. Now I'm really concerned about my baby, and I'm drinking as much water as I can, and I feel a warm gush between my legs. And because there are no windows in the cell, it's dark. I can't see what the gush is, but I just know from my professional experience to lay down, squeeze my legs tight, and hopefully somebody will come around. It wasn't until 2 in the morning before over after 2 in the morning before anybody came. And during that time, the young lady that was in the room with me, woke up because she heard me crying. And the rest of the ladies in there were banging, screaming, yelling for hours for help, but still no one came to after 2 in the morning. And like I said, even then, they didn't have a clear plan as to what to do. They had me upstairs. I had been requesting to be on the bottom because I was pregnant on the bottom floor. They never moved me. So now they were asking me, could I walk downstairs? And of course, I refused. So then they had to figure that out, how to get me downstairs. And then once they got me downstairs, then it was a matter of, well, what do we do? Do we call the marshals? Do we call 911? So all of these things. And in the meantime, I'm at this point now, I'm hemorrhaging because when they opened the door, the gush that was between my legs was blood. And it was
Mhm.
all over the cell. It was everywhere. So of course now I'm not only concerned about my baby's safety, I'm concerned about my own well-being. I'm begging them to call 911. Finally, after about an hour and my blood pressure steady going down, they finally called 911 and got me to the hospital. The marshals met me, automatically shackled me to the bed by a wrist and my ankle. That's how I endured the remainder of the miscarriage. Also, with two male officers between my legs that refused to just even step to another part of the room to give me privacy. And then to add insult to injury, They stated when I finally stopped bleeding enough to get an ultrasound and seeing that I had passed my baby, the officer stated that they had thrown it in the trash because I had passed it in the linen that I had bled on the way there. So just to, so just hearing that, a piece of me, my child, my baby, had been thrown in the trash. And then the tone of the officer so nonchalant, like they actually believed that my baby was trash, it's something that I'll never forget. And when I think of the lowest moments or the worst thing that ever happened to me, that would be the top of the list. And then after enduring all of that, I was placed in solitary, which they called medical observation, but it was solitary confinement. And I was in solitary confinement for about 8 months until I was finally sentenced, convicted, and designated to a federal location. So enduring these things are what prompted me to come home and do the work that I do now to make that change, because it was important for me that no other woman that I left behind or that came behind me went through what I went through and had the loss that I had, that I still deal with to this day.
Mhm, mhm. So there's a couple things I want to address. Prisons conditions. That's one thing
Right.
um, that you had to endure. But when I hear of the argument about not giving women the opportunity to make the choice of whether or not they want to conceive and have a child, and then to be put in a situation where you did want your child and that officers treated your child like garbage, right? It's hard to compute that someone would think that that was okay, that your child, because there was time that passed in between. How many months pregnant were you when you went in, and then
Yep.
subsequently to that, how much time elapsed between your fall and receiving any type of medical,
Right.
not even treatment, because I wouldn't even call it treatment, just being able to go and see a physician. So at what point, how many months pregnant were you, or weeks pregnant were you when you fell?
So when I first got to the facility and they gave me the pregnancy test, I was about 6 or 7 weeks at that time. And then, like I say, each one of those, so then we're talking about 2 weeks of not hearing anything back.
Mhm,
And then those requests, the turnaround time was 4 weeks. So we're talking about four requests. So that's another 16 weeks. I didn't make it to the full 16 weeks. So I calculate I had to be about right at 20 weeks when
mhm,
I lost my baby.
mhm. So for advocates who say, well, the fetus is viable at a certain point, your baby who you lost was viable.
Yes.
Um, I want to
And
know,
large enough for them to
for
see.
them to see that there was a
Yes.
baby.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't even imagine what that pain was like and what it continues to be for you. My question is, um, you say you deal with this every day, so it's trauma also
Yeah.
associated with that, right? And then being incarcerated is traumatic enough, but being incarcerated, um, knowing that you have just lost your child, how are you handling that trauma now? What are you doing to help yourself? Because telling the story, from what I understand, reliving it every time you have to, that's traumatic,
It
right?
is.
And so having this conversation with me right now, that's traumatic. And so how do you cope, and how do you suggest other people cope with that trauma?
So that's another dynamic of the situation, because even after I miscarried, of course, I didn't speak to anybody. They didn't offer, to allow me to speak to anybody. I really didn't deal with it. I think the first time anybody ever asked me when I came home and I was telling the story, one day someone asked me, "Did your baby have a name?" And it took me to a whole nother place, because I have conditioned myself to speak about the story and not personify my baby. Just share the story because it's necessary to tell the story. But that day, she gave personification to my child by asking me, did I have a name? Um, or, any kind of questions like that about what it looked like. And see, and it hit me hard because in order to be where I was and deal with what I was going through being incarcerated, and then knowing I had two sons outside that I had to maintain for and parent while I was away, I never allowed myself time to think about my baby. I just, of course you're around people 24/7, so it's not like you have any quiet time or private time that you can process anything. And like I said, there was no one to talk to. They didn't offer me anyone, to speak to about my experience. So I just kind of compartmentalized it and put it away somewhere back there, and always told myself there are other things that are the priority that you need to focus on every day, that kept me from thinking about that. And so, like I said, the first time that I spoke and someone asked me that question, it made me have to think about it. And even now, coming home, I still never gave my child that time, because when I got home, the priority was, where am I going to live? Where am I going to work? I still have my sons, establishing, reconnecting with them because I had been away for, 6.5 years or whatever. And so it still got pushed to the back burner. And honestly speaking with you sitting here now, I still have not fully dealt with it. Um, Things that I do for myself though, when I start to feel overwhelmed, because I do a lot of work. I think staying busy and doing a lot of things is one of the things that I do. But
Mhm.
then I get to a point where I was like, okay, you've worked yourself enough. And
You
when I
need a
get to
break.
that point, yes, I just kind of disconnect, and I might just spend the day of not looking at my phone and just doing whatever I feel like that day. If even if it's nothing but just sitting still in a chair all day and not thinking about anything or doing anything. But I try to do those things just to recharge myself. As far as my baby, I have a journal, and I have attempted to write things. And so far, when I start thinking about it, the only thing I've been able to write so far is the name. And I think because that's what the lady asked me that day, and it just
Mhm.
kind of helped with me.
Mhm.
But and so I sit and I have a name and I have a drawing of what, I feel like about the loss. And I haven't got past those two things. And I guess the reason why is because when I started to think about it, like I tried to imagine how old would he be now and what would he look like and those type things. It gets to be a lot, and I kind of just leave it to where it is and just keep it in my thoughts. So and so for me, I would just suggest to people, we all have things that outlets or things that we do that we feel make us feel better or that's therapeutic for us. Like my journaling, I draw, I write. So those are things that I try to do. And like I say, and just disconnecting and doing whatever feels good for you that day, that moment, do those things.
Mhm. Mhm. So, writing in your journal, there could potentially someday be a book, but maybe not. Um, but another question that I have for you is, you know, had done work previously where we looked at collateral consequences of incarceration
Mm-hmm.
and all of the industries that you are prohibited from being in if you've incarcerated, and all of the activities that you can no longer be associated with, and people just don't realize, as you say, people who aren't in this field, in this industry, or haven't actually lived it.
Right.
So
Like having
for
my
example,
professional license revoked.
so that was a question, like, you went to school, you studied, you became a nurse, and then you were incarcerated, you served your time. You paid your debt to society more in more ways than one, and you come home and your professional license is revoked.
Yes. And so
Because
now, being at that time, right, 40 or early 40s, you're talking about having to think of and start a whole another career at that age and with a background, which was very challenging.
mhm, yeah, I would only imagine that that level of frustration, having gone through all of that schooling, because I don't know how long nursing school is, but I would imagine that it takes some time because there's a lot that you have to learn, and
Right.
there are some licensing or things that are happening in different states about licensing. Is there anything happening with licensing as it relates to your particular profession in Georgia?
Well, in 2015 here in Georgia, the Georgia's Justice Project did do some legislation that was passed that will allow folks to receive occupational license as long as it doesn't relate to their crime. So I just had a conversation with them, matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, because we just passed the bill together, a probation reform bill, SB 105, which would make people eligible to get off probation in 3 years here in Georgia. And I told them we need to revisit the occupational license and do an amendment for people that already had licenses that got them revoked. And so do an amendment to make folks who have already have license, their license be able to be reinstated
Hmm.
once they are done with their time.
And that would be tremendous, because I would imagine that there are a lot of people
Yep.
in Georgia and around the country, right, that
Hmm.
have this issue in terms of their license. Is there any other would there be any other opportunity for you to go through the licensing board just as an individual to
Oh, of
say
course.
want your
There is, I looked at it initially when I came home, and that's another thing that needs to be dealt with that I plan on working on. You have to spend $300 just to complete an application to ask for your license, and then you're not guaranteed to get that license. And then because you've not practiced in a period of time, that also requires additional training that has to be done prior to use. So that's more money that you have to spend to get those CEUs and that training, established before you fill out the application. So you're spending all this money and providing all this time, and then they can still tell you no.
Mhm,
So initially, I didn't pursue it because I was like, I wasn't at a point yet or stable enough to be able to give that time and that type of money and not be sure that I was going to get my license. Of course, now I'm in a different place. I have a huge network of folks now
mhm,
that if I wanted to get my license, I'm sure it would not be a problem. But now I'm focused on, what I'm doing now and making the changes that I'm making now, that I do think about it. And people tell me I need to get them all the time, and I think, well, not even for me, because at the time when they took them, I just told myself, they took a piece of paper, they did not take away what's in here. My
right.
formal training is my training, I know it, and nobody can take what's in my head away from me. But I also think about my grandmother, because when I was in nursing school, I got several degrees in nursing. And so each time I started out, with an LPN, and then I went back to get, my RN, and then I went back to get all these certifications. I was a surgical nurse. So that was more schooling. And my grandmother was always there for me as far as being supportive and, watching my sons and, coming over to the house to make sure, we ate and, things were done so I could have that time. And I remember when I got when I graduated and I took the boards and got my license, how excited my grandmother was, because remember, my grandmother didn't finish school. I don't even think she finished high school. I think she may have dropped out like maybe her first year of high school, right out of elementary or something like that. And back then here in Georgia, all Black folks worked at the Scripto plant. But my grandmother wasn't able to keep that job because my mother, had issues with juvenile and that type of stuff. And so she couldn't keep that job because she would have to leave work a lot to go to the school. And so she ended up doing domestic work because that was the only work she could get that would
Hmm.
allow her, a flexible schedule. So she was so excited when, I got those license because here I am, the first person in my family, to accomplish such a thing. And so now I'm gonna get them for her. Although I'm like, I'm good. I don't, I can do other things, and I have done other things that they're not, the end of me. But just for my grandmother, because I know that she was so proud and she was so happy and excited to come to my graduation and to celebrate with me because she felt like she was part of that because
Right,
she
right.
helped me to get there. So I am gonna get them back just to celebrate her.
Well, that would be, I'm sure, she's, she's not here with you
Yeah,
any longer.
no.
She would be looking down and would be proud. But as you say,
And like you say, because I worked my butt off too.
yes, yes, because I can't even imagine, having I mean, I've been to college, but to do something like nursing, I had a hard time cutting the frog open in biology. So I
Oh
know
yeah.
I know how potentially squeamish I could be. So yeah. And like you said, just doing it for her, I think would mean a lot. But also because of the work that you're doing now, you're so focused on that if it comes, it comes, right?
Hmm.
It has to come at your own time. And I'm sure that the board would look at you like, I know that we would be willing, I'd be willing to write a letter, and I know you have a
Thank you.
whole team of supporters that would be willing to step up to the plate to say, look, this is ridiculous, particularly in light of the fact that we are in a pandemic and
Hmm.
there was a shortage of nurses. I mean, to have someone like you in the community that could, administer things like the shots and, just get the information out to people who are skeptical about being vaccinated. We can go down a whole rabbit hole there, but we
Yep.
won't. We will stick we will stick with this. So right now you have been helping several other advocates just pass anti-shackling legislation and other legislation around the country. Any one particular one stand out as, wow, this is going to be tough. This is going to be tough, but you guys were
Mississippi.
able to do it. Mississippi, isn't everything tough in Mississippi? Isn't everything tough?
The first time I went to Mississippi was with NNJ,
Mhm, mhm.
and I had never been because I had never wanted to go there.
Yeah.
It's just one of those places like, for what? And anybody
But
that
the one
lives
thing
there,
is that the reason we went to Mississippi is we're trying to go where we had board members, and we had a board member in Mississippi, and we were
yeah,
trying to go someplace where we would be in the community, where it wouldn't be like, no, we're not trying to be in the fanciest place, and we're trying to bring a community to another community. And so
right,
we decided to go to Mississippi because we wanted to go to the South. So we decided Mississippi because we had, people go to Atlanta, Georgia,
right, right,
but to go to Jackson, Mississippi, where you see everything that, the history is there and the poverty is there and the communities there, and there are people that are really, really trying to make the community better. So that's why
right,
we went to Mississippi. So I'm
right.
glad that you were able to come to
And
Mississippi.
I'm glad that I did go because, like I say again, with this, stereotypes in my mind, I was always like, anybody that lives in Mississippi, as soon as you're old enough to go, why aren't you going? Why would you
Right.
stay? And then it took me going with us. And then also my friend, my sister, my colleague, Pauline, meeting her. And I remember when I met her, I used to, on my social media, I would always see her name is liking everything I did, but I didn't know who she was.
Uh-huh.
And then the first time that, I met her, we were at a conference and she walked up to me and she says, Pamela Wynn. And I was like, yes, that's me. And she was like, well, I'm Pauline Rogers. And I was like, I know that name. And then it came to me. I said, you're the lady that likes everything that I put on social media. And she gave me a big hug and she says, yes, I follow you. I love the work that you're doing. And I was like, thank you. And then when she told me she was from Mississippi, I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna ever see you because Mississippi, no, no, no. But then I got to, when we went, I got to see her home, her work, and everything, and just see how, for me, being from the South, we are underserved, but I felt like Mississippi, when I was there, I just felt like I said, everybody needs to stop what we're doing and everybody just needs to come here and
Go to
help
Mississippi.
Mississippi just at least get to the same level as
Uh-huh.
everybody else. So never in a million years did I think Mississippi would be open and would pass the dignity to shackling legislation, but they did, and I was so proud to be able to say that
Mhm.
Mississippi did it. So now I tell everybody else, if Mississippi did it, you can
You
do
can do
it.
it.
So yes, so
Yeah.
currently now I'm working with North Carolina, and on, was it Tuesday? Yeah, we passed unanimously on the House floor, and so now it's on to the Senate. I anticipated that it's gonna pass. When we first started out, they called me because they were having problems with the sheriffs, which is usually the opposition that you get regardless of what state you're in. It's always the sheriffs that give the pushback. And so, I worked with them and, gave them the strategy that I use in all the other places. And it worked there. It worked there to the point where the sheriffs actually, during the press conference, spoke and publicly supported the legislation. So,
Mm.
like I say, it should just sail through. I told them we got that. Everything else should be a breeze. And
Yeah.
so the next target is getting Alabama on board. They've started doing the work, but we just need to follow through and make sure we get it done for them next session.
Yeah. No, I think that's incredible that you were able to, move around and help fellow advocates out there that are doing this work. And because it's hard. It's hard to
Yeah.
get legislation passed.
That's
It's
what they
hard.
keep telling me, but I don't know. I don't
I
believe it. I
know,
don't
I
want to
know,
hear
I know. We should
it.
stop saying that it's hard to get legislation passed, but I've worked in the legislative arena, and I've worked for a legislator, worked for congressperson, and I have worked for advocacy organizations, and so I know the process, of being behind the scenes and seeing them make the
Yep.
sausage. And I've been on the advocacy side, where it's just like, oh my gosh, each step of the way, you're just crossing your fingers that this legislator will, agree to a meeting and will come and sit down and talk to you and will not just shut the door on you. So it is a process, and we should probably not say that it's always so hard, but sometimes it's challenging. Let's just say it's
Yeah,
challenging, and
I
it's a
agree with
process.
you. It is challenging. And I just want to thank God, that I've been blessed because I had one of my colleagues here when I remember she told me yesterday when we the other day when we passed in North Carolina. She says, Pam, I remember when you first started this work, and she said, you remember me telling you that, getting legislation passed is really difficult, and don't get discouraged because it might take you years, to get something passed. She said, and remember what you said to me? I said, because I still say the same thing. I don't know nothing about that. I don't want to hear nothing about that. We getting this
You're
done.
just getting it
She was,
done.
she said, and I said to myself, bless her heart, bless her heart. She said, but now she said, I have to take my hat off to you. She said, because you did it in 1 year. She was like, and it didn't take you out. She said, and now I'm looking at you and you've helped do it in all these different states. And she was like, and how long has Restore Her been around? I said, we'll be 3 June 15th. And she was like, she said, that's unheard of to be
Yeah.
able to pass so much legislation in that length of time. She was like, so I have learned that I won't ever tell you what can't be done or what something gonna do. She said, this is what I do now. She said, when you come to me and tell me what you want to do, she said, I don't care how over the top and out far fetched it sounds. I just look at you and say, okay,
Okay.
what you need me
Oh,
to do. Because she said,
right,
you have
right.
showed me that. I told her, I said, well, I look at it as for me, it's just divine order. That's all I know to say because
Mhm.
I understand that. And people tell me that all the time. And in the process of doing this, I see where, it's a tedious process and it does take time. And because, like you say, you have to make sure everybody has what they want. First, you got to make sure that they're going to listen to you. And
Mhm.
then when you get their ear, you got to make sure everybody has what they want. And it's very difficult, of course, to please a number of people. And especially when you're working on bipartisan stuff where we don't have the same ideology, we don't have the same anything.
Yeah,
So
you don't have the
finding a
same
common
experience.
ground.
But that's why it's important, I think, that you have the experience, right, of
Mhm.
having lost a child and been in shackles, and you have the ability to come to the table like saying, okay, we could just get this done. Where some of us who've been doing the work for a while in legislation specifically are a little bit more leery of, oh man, are we going to be able to talk to that legislator, you know? And so I think that you need both. You
Yeah.
need those who are willing to just take the chance and just go out there and just do it, and those who are like, okay, well, let's think about this. Should we go here first or should we go there first? So you need a balance of both. So I think that is absolutely beautiful that you bring that to the table, and that you've been able to help your fellow advocates around there in the field. And yeah, Pauline she is, man, she is doing some stuff in Mississippi. I interviewed her also. She's doing some stuff in Mississippi. I'm very, very proud. I'm very proud of all of you guys, because I think that um having been in this work since about 2001, I've seen just a trajectory of people who are able to come home and just hit the ground running,
Zoom, right.
just hit the ground running and do so much in a short period of time. Because you're talking this organization, her being 3 years old in, less than a month, that is tremendous, right? And
Mhm.
it's such an accomplishment. And so I'm always just very proud of and in awe of all of you who do this work, who are out there. So what I want to ask you lastly is, if you were not doing this work, what do you think you would be doing if everything that has happened to you thus far didn't happen, right? You had your third child, and you have your credentials as a nurse. What do you think you would be doing? Would you be doing this work, or would you be doing something totally different?
I don't think I would be doing this work. And I think that's part of the reason why, when I sat there and I kept asking myself, God, why? I had put in all this work, all my childhood dreams of, finishing school, becoming, a professional, owning my own business. I had done all of that. So at the time that this happened to me, I was at like I had just ran through the finish line of doing everything that I had always dreamed of as a child. And so then to have it all come crashing down and all taken away, of course, it was like, why? I mean, I know the answer now,
Mhm.
to do what I'm doing now. So I don't think that I would have ever opened my eyes to what I'm doing now because, again, like I said, my mother, I'm sorry, Bally, my mother, my brother, my family, people in my family had been directly impacted, and still it didn't home into me. I was still under the, oh, well, they're fine. They get what they need when they're in there, and that type of thing. I was thinking it had to be the other way. Like I said, I need to just get my own business, and then I can give them something to do. But not looking any deeper than that. And I probably would not have looked. We get comfortable in our spaces.
Right.
That was a whole nother professional space that I was in, dealing with doctors and other medical professions on a daily. I've always like researched STEM research. I was looking at going from surgery into that type thing. Surgery, my specialty in surgery was open heart. And I worked at Emory, which is a teaching hospital. So I was always, they're always having us, they get all the new drugs, all of the new medical gadgets. So I was always learning stuff. So I was enjoying that. I would probably be somewhere doing that, or have already invented my own medical,
Mhm.
some kind of medical something to serve in the space. I see that is where I would have been doing, because that's what I was doing then.
Yeah, and that could still happen.
Yes, it can still
It could
happen.
still
It can
happen.
still happen.
Just like you say, talk about legislation, it could still happen.
Yep, it can still happen.
So tell me, how can people get in touch with you, get in touch with the organization?
Okay, so we have two websites. So our main website is restoreher.us. And then we have another website for the programming. I'm a Soros Fellow, and I created a curriculum for directly impacted women. And so we have a website for our programming, and that is restoreher.info. And then they can email me info@restoreher.us. And then social media, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at restoreher.us for both of those. I keep on there everything that we're doing, any calls to action, all of that type of stuff. And then Twitter is at restoreher_us.
Okay. Well, I hope people will get in touch with you. And again, I'm so proud of you
Thank you.
and all the work that you're doing, and keep it up and take care of yourself, because I know that is important. And I
Yes,
know
it
that when you
is.
get so entrenched in the work that you don't always take time for you, but you take time for you and take time to kiss that little grandbaby.
Definitely that.
All
That's my
right.
replacement.
Y- that's your replacement, huh?
Hmm.
Yeah, you taking care,
I
taking
really
care.
believe that. I mean,
Yeah.
because in my family, I have all got boys. I was the only girl, and
Uh-huh.
now she's the girl that has
Yeah.
come. So, and I'm like my replacement.
Oh, Lord, what a blessing she is, and
At
she is,
least I get to see my replacement before I leave here, and get to spend some time with her.
and she'll know who her grandmama is.
Hmm.
All right. Well, thank you again so much. I appreciate your time. I know you're
Thank
very
you,
busy.
Angeline.
So thank you, and I really hope that we get to see each other soon in person.
Exactly. Oh, well, NACDL, they say they're doing in-person stuff.
Yeah, yeah, they're doing in-person things. So yeah, it's
So
possible.
I'm planning on trying to be there.
Yeah, good, good.
You still involved with planning and doing all that stuff though?
No, because it's a totally
Oh,
different
okay.
organization. Yeah, but Monica Reed is handling all of that. So yeah, that'll be good. That'll be good. All right, lady. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you. Stay safe.